Welcome to the Analytic Christian. I'm Jordan, and this is the channel that helps you explore Christian philosophy and theology. I'm really excited. Today, we're going to be talking about open theism, or a particular account of open theism. And my guest is Patrick Todd. Hi there, Dr. Todd.
Hi, Jordan. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, and I'm very excited for you to join me. So, you've just written a book, or it recently came out, published by Oxford University Press, called The Open Future: Why Future Contingents Are All False. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring you on and just ask you some fairly basic questions about your view to give people a sense of how this works. So first, let's start with this. What do philosophers mean by future contingents?
Right. So that's a good question, and it's a question that can be answered in different ways. I mean, I think that the terminology of future contingents has been around for a long, long time, but the way I like to think about future contingents is this. So a future contingent is just a claim about what's going to happen, where that claim is, as it were, not guaranteed by current conditions. So, it's a claim to the effect that some event is going to happen in the future, but current conditions leave it open whether that event is going to happen. So, in other words, current conditions don't guarantee that the event is going to happen, nor do they guarantee that the event is not going to happen, right? Or is going to not happen, let's say. So, in other words, there are ways things could develop from here in which the event happens. There are ways things could develop from here in which it doesn't happen. That's just to say it's not determined. Okay, in that kind of scenario, now the claim that the event is going to happen will happen is a future contingent. So you could contrast a future contingent with what you might think of as a future necessity. So a future necessity would be a claim that something will happen where current conditions guarantee the thing is going to happen. And so a future contingent is just a claim about the future where that's not the case. So that's what future philosophers tend to mean by future contingents. And of course, this problem of future contingents has been around for a long time. But I suppose we could start there with just a first pass gloss on what we
Yes.
mean.
So
Yeah.
just to put an example on it, a
Mhm.
future contingent might be, I will eat a bowl of cereal, tomorrow morning. Would that be a future contingent?
Sure. I mean, so the funny thing about future contingents is you can't tell whether a claim is a future contingent just by looking at it. You got to know something about the world. You got to know that it's not determined that Jordan has a bowl. What did you say?
A
Bowl
bowl
of
of
cereal
cereal, yeah.
for breakfast. Because if it were causally determined that Jordan has a bowl of cereal for breakfast tomorrow morning, um, well, then the claim that that's what Jordan's going to do tomorrow morning wouldn't be a future contingent. It would be what I was calling a future necessity. So, you know, that's why it makes it a little bit hard to define future contingent. It's that you can't just say it's, as it were, a claim about the future. It's it's something like it's a claim about the future. Oh, and by the way, it's also the case that current conditions or current reality uh, doesn't guarantee it, or something like
Mhm.
that. So,
I'm
yeah,
curious, in your view then, if I added, "I will freely eat a bowl of cereal tomorrow morning," would that be sufficient then to say that's a future contingent?
that's a good question. So, under the assumption that freedom requires indeterminism,
Mhm.
any claim to the effect that a person will freely do this or that would thereby have to be a future contingent. Um, and so, for this type of reason, philosophers attracted to this idea of the open future have generally wanted to say that none of these claims are true. So it can't now be true already, as it were, that Jordan is going to freely do this or that, because the idea that he's going to freely do it, well, that implies that it's not determined, in which case the claim that he's going to do it is a future contingent. And then um, proponents of views like my own, on which the future is open, are going to then say these types of claims just aren't true.
Okay. All right, that helps me get an idea of what we're talking about by future contingents. Now, your book
Mhm.
tries to argue that all future contingents are false. So why do you think that?
Yeah, good. Okay. Long story to be told here, perhaps, but maybe what I could do is begin with the more simple idea. Why do I think that future contingents aren't true? That's been a pretty popular idea. And then maybe I could say something about why I think they're false. Uh,
Okay.
so, I mean, the classic reason for thinking that future contingents aren't true is just that, as it were, there'd be nothing about current reality to make them true, right? So, the kind of idea is that, look, it would be arbitrary. It would be metaphysically arbitrary if just one of these two claims about the future were true. So just consider the kind of uh, case that goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle had this famous discussion of the sea battle tomorrow, and so he thought, okay, so consider the claim that there will be a sea battle tomorrow. Now consider the claim that there will not be a sea battle tomorrow. Um, well, if current reality leaves it open, so there are ways things could go where there's a sea battle, ways things could go where there's not. It's not determined. Um, well, it would just be arbitrary. It would be sort of metaphysically arbitrary if, uh, unbeknownst to us, just one of these claims were true. If it were just brutally true that actually there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow. Why would that be true when equally there could fail to be one tomorrow? Um, so I've always liked that type of idea. I've always thought, yeah, that strikes me as convincing. It's be really weird. It would be really strange if future contingents were true, because it'd be metaphysically arbitrary. Um, Now there are different ways you could try to unpack that basic thought, but that's the kind of core thought I think that underlies this idea of the open future. Um, it's that uh, you know there's nothing about the world that really could make these claims true. And so, since nothing about the world can make these claims true, the best thing to say is just they're not true. Okay, so that would mean, it's not now true that Jordan will have a bowl of cereal for breakfast tomorrow, right? I mean, what about the way things are would make that true? Well, by parity of reasoning, it's also not true that Jordan will fail to have that bowl of cereal for breakfast tomorrow. I mean, what would make that true? So what you want to say is both of these claims fail to be true. Um, so I mean, that's the kind of starting intuition, maybe that look, future contingents can't be true, um, and now there's a hard question. Well, okay, how are you going to reconcile that with other principles of logic you might believe, or how are you going to reconcile that with other things you might believe? But that I think is why I think they're not true. Um,
Okay, so let me ask for some clarification there. You started by saying, "Well, let me first show you why I think they're not true,
yeah,
and then I'll try to show you why I think they are false." Now,
yeah,
some people may hear that and think, "Well, as soon as you've shown me that they're
mhm,
not true, then just automatically that means they're false."
yeah,
But it seems like that's not the common assumption. Would it be the case that, like, somebody like Aristotle
yeah,
thought of that sea battle scenario,
mhm,
that proposition, "There will be a sea battle tomorrow," was like a gappy proposition? It's the kind of thing that isn't true, but also isn't false, it just lacks a truth value?
yeah. Now that's the standard interpretation of Aristotle. I think Aristotle interpretation is extremely difficult, and I don't recommend it. But uh, the kind of classic understanding here is he's denying bivalence. Now, again, this is not a claim about Aristotle. This is a claim about what lots of people say about Aristotle. I have a colleague, well, a friend, Jason Carter, who's writing a paper about why Aristotle's view is actually that future contingents are false, like mine. Okay, so I make no claims about Aristotle, but certainly a common view is that, look, Aristotle was trying to give up bivalence here. He was trying to say it's neither true nor false that Jordan will have cereal tomorrow, and neither true nor false that he will not. And so, however, I mean, I tend to sympathize, at least, with your first pass reaction. Is that, well, look, I mean, as soon as you show that these claims aren't true, I mean, isn't that just to show that they're false? Because for any claim, if it's not true, it's false. That would be to assume the principle of bivalence. So bivalence is this sort of metalogical law. It's a kind of it's a law about what just says that for any proposition, it takes only one of two truth values, true or instead false. And yeah, so lots of people have thought, the best thing to do in this nasty situation is just to give up bivalence. We have this strong intuition, that, there can't be any this, metaphysical arbitrariness. So, well, we got to say that one's not true, that one's not true. The best thing to say is that they're just neither true nor false. That's the cost.
Okay. So now but you don't go that route in the book. So you're going to argue that they are in fact false. Future contingents are false. So take us through that step. You've walked us through thinking, okay, they're not true, but why think they're all false?
Well, in a sense, I don't have much of an argument that they're false. I almost just have, this reaction, which is, well, why not say they're false? And then I try to respond to a lot of different objections to just taking that what I think of as default position. That, look, if a claim's not true, it's false. So let's just say it's false that Jordan will have a bowl of breakfast tomorrow morning. It's also false that he will not. Okay, so it's false that there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow. It's false that there will fail to be a sea battle tomorrow. That's what it is for it to be open. It's for it to be false that there will be, false that there will fail to be. Okay, why not say that? That would preserve bivalence. At least, maybe I could pause and just say, whether or not whatever you previously thought of bivalence, maybe you just think this case is not a good reason to give it up. I mean, we don't really have any good reason to give up bivalence from this, and that's kind of what I think. I think, well, we could just say it's false that Jordan will, false that Jordan will not. Why not? And so now a lot of people have thought they've seen some good reason to say why not. Why it would be bad to say that these future contingents are false. But really, what I try to do is just say, yeah, none of these reasons are that compelling. So maybe I'll pause there and see what if you have any reactions to that, and then
Okay, so I'm thinking of, let's stick with the sea battle. We jump back and forth between cereal and sea battles.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's stick with the sea battle for a second. So I've got this proposition in mind.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a sea battle tomorrow.
Yeah.
And on your view, that proposition can only have one of two truth values. It's either true or false, right? And so that's just the principle of bivalence.
Uh-huh.
That's like one move that you make. But then you also make this other move of saying it's false as well. So it has to have one of those values, and a future contingent's going to be false.
Yeah.
So now, if the proposition there will be a sea battle tomorrow is false, my initial thought is, does that automatically make the negation true?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So
Yeah.
it is not the case that there will be a sea battle tomorrow, that would be the negation.
That would be the
Does that
negation.
automatically become true?
Yes. Yeah. So now the whole book of the bulk of the book is really about the negation of a future contingent. And what does that amount to? So yes, the negation of a future contingent is going to more or less always be true on my account. It's going to be. It's not the case that there will be a sea battle tomorrow. But now the crucial thing is this thing about what linguists call scope. What's the scope of that negation? It's not the case that there will be a sea battle tomorrow. Is that to say the same thing as it will be tomorrow that there is not a sea battle? So here's the thing is that in ordinary life, it's extremely weird to try to say, oh, all I'm saying is it's not the case that there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow. I'm not saying that there's going to be no sea battle tomorrow. That makes you some complete weirdo. Um, and I don't recommend that you try to say that to to people in ordinary life because they're going to laugh at you. But lots of philosophical positions, might be true, but sort of laughable in ordinary circumstances. And that's my view. Is that yeah, basically, you know, in ordinary life, we tend to assume that if it's not the case that there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow, or not the case that there will be a sea battle tomorrow, that's the same as saying there will not be a sea battle tomorrow.
Mhm.
Actually, if you're careful, you'll see that these two claims aren't equivalent. Um, and here's just an example to help. So, suppose someone asks me about my opinions about um, Trump or Biden or something, and someone said, "Well, what do you think about Trump?" And I said, "Look, I don't think he was a good president, or I don't think Trump is a good president." I mean, that's a little bit dated now, but let's just stick with that one. I don't think Trump is a good president. Okay. Now, as lots of people have remarked or noticed, when you say you don't think that's something, most of the time your interlocutor is going to understand that as a stronger claim, namely that you think that that thing is false. It's not the case. So if I say, like, I don't think Trump's a good president, you interpret that to mean Patrick thinks Trump is not a good president. So in other words, what you do is you move the negation, not, like doesn't think, which is really outside of the belief, and you interpret that to be as associated with the embedded thing, which is believes that not.
Mhm.
So this kind of thing happens all the time in natural language. If I
Oh,
say,
okay.
if
I'm
I
I'm
say,
almost thinking of,
yeah,
like, take theism, for example. So it's like if I said, "I don't believe in God,"
yeah,
I don't therefore mean,
I believe that there's
um,
no God.
I believe there is no God. I
Exactly.
could be an agnostic,
You could be an
right?
agnostic. That's the great case. That's a perfect case. I don't believe that P is consistent with agnosticism with respect to P.
Mhm.
So this book doesn't believe in God. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
I mean, the book lacks a belief in God. But usually, that's like a thing you're not supposed to say in ordinary life. Like that. Like when you say the book doesn't believe in God. That's like, why would you say that? It's true. It's true. It doesn't. But it's just a weird thing to say because usually doesn't believe implies believes not.
Okay.
Now that can be canceled. Like you could be a bit of a smart aleck and be like, well, look, I don't believe that Trump is a good president. Of course, I also don't believe he was not a good president. You could do that. Um, but the point is that you have to do that. Otherwise, the pragmatic implication will carry the day. So similarly, this happens all the time. Like you ask me, hey, do you want to go to my party? I'm like, I don't want to go to your party. Um, well, you don't hear that as consistent with my neutrality. Like you hear that as like, I want to refrain from going to your party, even
Mhm.
though like it could be true of me that I don't want to go, and nor do I want to not go. I'm kind of like on the fence,
Yeah, yeah.
um, or like no one should do that. No one should. Tends to imply that everyone shouldn't, but like actually maybe no one should do that. But of course, like no one should like not do that either. I mean, maybe no one's got an obligation either way. So I kind of go through a bunch of linguistic data in the book and apply this kind of phenomenon that linguists discuss called neg raising, which is kind of the thing we've just been talking about. And I try to show that, look, why can't we just understand this stuff about the future in the same way? Like, yes, usually if I say, look, I'm not going to be at your party tomorrow, like that, you interpret that as like it's going to be that I'm not at the party. But so, I mean, that this is when we're talking about like philosophy and these philosophical theories, what matters is what's strictly speaking true and false. And I think that, look, we can just say like it's not the case that it will. That doesn't mean that it won't. Um, Problems.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I see that. That's helpful. Okay. So I think you laid out why um your this initial pass of, well, we think future contingents are not true, and
Mhm.
then more or less you're saying, okay, I'm gonna stick with bivalence and say, uh, so then they're false, but that doesn't automatically commit me to affirming the truth of the negation. It that can is that did I get that part right? No?
So it doesn't commit me to affirming the truth of what you might call the internal negation. So like it will be that not P. That would be something like the internal negation of um, the claim that it will be that P. So this is a little bit tricky. So I mean, really what I'm trying to say is like the negation of it will be that P isn't it will be that not P. It's like or here it is in a slogan form. Like consider it will be that um, there's a sea battle. That's a prediction. So the idea is that the negation of a prediction is not the prediction of a negation.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like if I am committed to the truth of the negation of the prediction, but that doesn't mean that I'm committed to the truth of the prediction of the negation, which is
Yeah.
the thing that matters. So I'm committed to the negation of the prediction that Jordan will do this or that
Mhm.
there will be a sea battle tomorrow. I'm not committed to the truth of the prediction of the negation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, that was my mistake.
Well,
Gotcha.
it's I mean, an extremely natural one, and I mean, part of the part of what I'm doing is trying to say like, actually, once you think about it, you'll see that there's a kind of charm to the view I'm suggesting, but it does take it takes a bit of work to kind of get your head into the space because it's extremely weird. It's extremely weird.
Okay, so the thing I've been pressing about the negation, that was like one type of objection, but I'm interested in some objections that would be most relevant for Christian philosophy. So
Mhm.
what objections might there be to your view that, would seem pressing on like a Christian that took your view?
Well, that's a good question. I think that there are different things you could press on. I mean, the first thing to note is just that, I mean, you know, this is just to go back to the kind of logical problem we've just been discussing is that, you know, I'm going to have to say what sound like some weird things to say. So um, I think the classic problem that I think is that plagues my view is that, suppose I said there will be a sea battle tomorrow or there will not be a sea battle tomorrow. It can kind of sound like that's got to be true.
Mhm.
Okay, but I'm saying both are false. Um, okay, so I have a long story about why actually it's okay to think that that disjunction is false. It's related to what we were just talking about, but I think that in the book, what I'm really most concerned about is to try to show that um, that's not an instance of what is sometimes called the law of excluded middle, and it's perfectly fine to say that yeah that claim is false, that disjunction, that or claim. Um, but okay, I mean, setting aside that type of problem, um, there are different things you might worry about. One thing I think that people worry about in connection with views like my own is, what about this idea of omniscience? Where's the room for omniscience in this picture? isn't this to deny um, divine omniscience? Because look, God is supposed to know these facts about the future. If God, if there were an omniscient being, God would have to know these facts. I mean, the way I reply to that is not unique to me, and it's a point made by open theists before, which is just that, look, I mean, it's kind of obvious that if you did take my view, you're not going to run into a problem with divine omniscience. Um, to say that there are no truths in a certain domain, uh, that's that's not to get you in trouble with omniscience. I mean, um, there's only going to be a problem with omniscience if there are some truths in that domain to know, and then God doesn't know them, right? Then it's looking like, okay, you're giving up omniscience because lots of truths there. God doesn't know them. Is thereby not omniscient, not is thereby not all knowing. But of course, on my view, there are no truths about future free acts, say, for
Hmm.
instance, for God to know. And so that God doesn't know them is no threat to God's omniscience. Um, and in
Yeah,
general,
the way we typically think of omniscience is God believes all the truths that there are, and he
yeah,
doesn't believe any falsehoods.
yeah,
Well, if in your case, if all the future contingents that there are, they're
mhm,
all false,
yeah,
so God's not gonna believe any of those future contingents,
yeah, that's
and
right.
there's none of them are true,
Mhm,
so he doesn't believe those,
yeah,
so then that's just no mark against his omniscience.
yeah, it's no mark against omniscience. I think that uh, that point seems to me to be relatively clear. I mean, I think that amongst philosophers, nearly everyone grants that. I mean, but you do see lots of people who are interested in open theism kind of making that uh, what I regard as a mistake. I think it's a natural mistake. It's sort of a first pass thing that you might think, oh, well, wait, what about omniscience? How is this consistent with omniscience? But it's perfectly consistent with omniscience. Um, I mean, really, in the context maybe for your channel and the issues that maybe people who are watching this interview are interested in. Um, there are more general problems with open theism about whether it's religiously adequate in other domains. Providence, the problem of evil, things like that. Um, what I'm really interested in this book is some more narrow set of questions, which is, you know, is it going to be adequate logically? Is there any kind of logical objection to a picture on which the future is open? And I think no. I mean, no, there's not. There might be metaphysical objections. There might be objections like, you know, um, after all, maybe we need to think that the future is settled in some way, you know, um, and if that were the case, then the future couldn't be open. Um, Maybe there are objections from the nature of time, you know, so there are these views on which, say, four dimensionalism is true, or what's some different views sometimes called eternalism. This is a kind of block universe theory. Well, yeah, you could have those types of objections to my type of picture as well. But it's almost the objections are so many that it's sort of hard to pick one or two.
Right, right. Yeah, so I could definitely see how one's view of time could play a role in objecting to your view.
Yeah,
But there's a multiplicity of views there, so, if
yeah.
people want to explore that, I'm sure you take that on in the book.
Yeah, I mean, what I say in the book is that really I'm just assuming what's sometimes been called um, presentism, and I don't have anything good to say in defense of presentism. Some other people do, not me, but I'm just kind of assuming that in the book, um, and sort of saying, well, if you took presentism seriously and you took indeterminism seriously, so the idea that not everything is determined, Well, then you might like this idea that, there's no fact of the matter about what's going to happen tomorrow or whatever. And if you like that idea, here's a way to make sense of it logically.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of people feel like, they need to, they like presentism independently, and they want to hang on to indeterminism, partly because maybe um, physics is indeterministic, but maybe partly because of free will considerations having to do with free will. Well, um, if you like those two things, then lots of people think you need to say that the future is open. Here again, here's a way to make sense of that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I had fun talking about this with you.
Thanks very much, Jordan, and all the best to you.
One more time for the viewer, uh, Patrick's book, The Open Future: Why Future Contingents Are All False. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video if you want to check it out for more details. And all right, we'll see you later. Thanks.